Hi everybody, thank you for joining me on this video, and today we're gonna be talking about the 5 things that will keep your air plants alive. It is quite the highly requested topic, and basically every time we go to the shows and plant expos, I think we get a lot of questions about that, so that's what we're gonna talk about today. But yeah, so just quickly, one of the reasons why we haven't been posting as much is because of this little girl over here. Yeah, her name is Bailey, and she's been, such a sweetheart. But yeah, definitely took us some time to get used to having a puppy. But yeah, good girl. Say hi. All right. So, all right, before we get into the nitty gritties, I'm just gonna quickly go through air plants' anatomy and how they get their nutrients, because it is an important thing to kind of know to really care for your air plants properly. I feel like a lot of times people kill their air plants because they are just such a different kind of plant to take care of compared to tropicals, succulents, or just any house plants basically. Yeah, so one thing to really know about air plants is that they don't need soil to grow. So they do grow roots, but the roots is for them to kind of hang on to objects like trees or rocks in the wild. So they don't really take nutrients from them. A few species do use their roots to take some nutrients, like curly slim, or some more like potted Tillandsias, of course. The pink quill is one. So those are a little bit different. But most of the air plants that you would keep in your collection, like these ones over here, they take nutrients from their leaves. They have little trichomes, the little hairs they use to kind of absorb nutrients and water. And they're also used to deflect sunlight, and this will be pretty important later on when we talk about light situation. Yeah, so we'll go through the few things that you can do that can keep your plants alive. So do watch to the very end, because each section is quite important on its own. Yeah, so the first thing that I would like to talk about is water and humidity around your air plants. Watering your air plants, as I talked about in a few other videos, we can do it by spraying them just on the leaves, or I prefer to soak them, because that's when they really can take in all the water they need. Spraying, it depends on how you spray it. If you only mist it around it, it's not enough. If you spray the whole plant, it's pretty good, but it still, dry out pretty quickly, and they don't really absorb everything they need. So soaking the air plant is my preferred method of watering them, except for a few species that can probably get away with just spraying. Tillandsia tectorum, the snowballs, are a pretty good example. They can typically survive with just spraying. I do still soak them, but I soak them for less time, like around 15-20 minutes only. But if you spray them, yeah, they would be okay if you do it maybe twice a week. It also kind of depends on how the air plant is grown in the wild. The reason that the tectorum can take less soaking is because they are grown in the wild. They grow on the cliffs or like higher altitude on the mountains. So they actually just take nutrients and moisture from the morning dew. So they don't really need like huge amount of water. So when you water them too often or soak them for too long, they actually start to lose the kind of white and fluffy look. Yeah, so that's one thing to note quickly there. Zographica, I also don't soak them for too long. This is another example, because they just don't really need it. Yeah. Of course, you want to keep the humidity high if you notice there's more brown tips For some of the newer leaves, especially if you see brown tips, then you might want to give it a little bit more soaking or spraying. But typically speaking, you want to keep your keep your Xero graphica on the drier side, I would say. Yeah, so in terms of humidity, these guys do like high humidity, but they're not as picky as some of the tropicals. So generally speaking, like normal humidity at home is fine. But obviously, if you want optimal growth and keep them really happy, humidity around 60 to 70 is probably even better. So inside a greenhouse cabinet, or if you have a grow tent, or if you just have a room with higher humidity, like you have humidifier, they would be even happier. And if you do that, then they probably need less soaking or less spraying too. So that's one thing to consider. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for this topic. Although I would mention that one thing that if you want to keep your air plants alive, watering them too little is usually not the problem. It's usually watering them too much or not letting them dry out properly. So that will be the next topic. But one thing I want to mention in this topic would be water quality. So you just want to make sure when you're watering your air plants, you're not using really hard water, especially if it's just straight tap. In some regions, the tap water has a lot of chemicals and can be pretty detrimental to their health because they absorb everything through the leaves. So it can burn the leaves or slowly damage the plant itself. So I like to use filtered water, or I let the tap water to sit for around few hours at least. Yeah, or overnight is even better. I believe reverse osmosis water is also a good option if you have that. Rainwater is actually the best if you can collect them, but obviously make sure you don't have any bugs or bacteria in the water if you do use those. Actually, I missed one thing when I was talking about water. Since talking about the green leaf and white leaf varieties, one thing you should know is that the greener the plants are, they would require more moisture and watering too. Yeah, so just keep that in mind. And thinner varieties like the Funkiana and Andriana, like this one, they would appreciate more watering as well. So that's one of the reasons why a Xero graphica doesn't need as much watering, because it has thicker leaves, very wide leaves, and they also have pretty thick trichomes. So these two combination make them easier for them to stay hydrated when you water them. But yeah, that's about it for water and humidity. So moving on to the next topic, which is dryness and airflow. So dryness is probably one of the reasons your air plant's not doing well if it's too dry. So you want to make sure the humidity is high, which is kind of related to the first topic. But also make sure you keep a good balance between when the plant is drying after watering and when it's just resting in its home, or whenever, like when it's hanging in your cabinet or whatever. So typically speaking, you want the plant to be dry but the humidity high. So you never want the plant to be kind of soaked in water and has a lot of water at the bottom or in the crown of the plant. So this is basically the most important thing that you want to know is after you soak your plants, you want to keep it dry. You want to dry it quickly. So I would say within 4 to 5 hours, you want your plant to be completely dry. That way you can prevent any fungal issues or rotting problems to start. So what I do is after I soak them, I make sure the plant is not, sitting at a area or a pot which the bottom can be very wet for a long time. Yeah, so make sure it's in a pretty like free airflow area, or something that's more porous and can breathe. Yeah, so the plant doesn't just sit there and stay wet. And you want the airflow in the room that you're drying your air plants in to be pretty good. Yeah, so typically I use a fan to circulate the air, or even like blow directly on the plant, so the water doesn't sit on the plant for too long and the plant can completely dry out before I put them back on the shelf. Few plants that are more prone to rotting issues after watering would be something like the caput medusa, which has a pretty bulbous bottom. Celeriana, bulbosa, bootsii, these are all ones I can think about right now that has this kind of shape. So you just want these plants to be dry here as soon as you can. So when you take it out of the water, if you soak them, shake it pretty vigorously and you'll see water keep coming out because they're trapped in the base. So make sure you let them all come out, the water all come out, and then you prop it upside down or on the side would be the best to let it dry. And again, having a fan around would help the plant to dry out within 4 to 5 hours. And for plants like this, Xerographica, or even something like this, that has a center, you want the plant to not stay at the center. So same thing, you want it to be upside down and shake it pretty well before you dry it. Some people do like to dry their Xerographica upside down. I personally don't, because I just don't want to damage the top leaves. But yeah, if you're careful enough, usually it's okay. But so you don't want the water to stay at the crown for too long. Another thing I should mention for this topic is there's a few plants that look like this, like thin but has a base at the bottom. So this is Tillandsias andriana, probably Fuchsiae gracilis would be another one, or even Aonantha. Some of them, yeah. You want to make sure the base of the plant doesn't get too moist for too long. Excuse me. So for example, if you have it in a pot like this, it might not be the best for them because the bottom cannot breathe freely. So for air plants like the Tillandsias andriana, or a few that is a little thinner variety, sometimes if the base is too wet or moist, it might not be good for them in the long run too. So how you display the plant is pretty important. If you put it in a pretty closed in like container like this one, and there's not enough airflow at the bottom, they might not love that. This one actually still has a little bit of room inside, so it should be okay. Yeah, so just make sure you give it enough room to breathe at the bottom. Yeah, so the plant can be happy and it will like breathe better basically in general. So that's another thing about airflow that I would talk about. Displays like this is actually really good for air plants because it basically gives them total freedom to breathe. And this is just aluminum wire that I just made myself, and you can kind of wrap the wire around the base of the plant if it's a plant like this. Or you can just create kind of like a hole for it to sit in, and you can just hang it on the shelf or in your cabinet or at the window. Yeah, so this is a really good way to both display and grow your air plant, because it's kind of mimics their wild condition the best, and also just gives them a lot of room to breathe, and also give them kind of full potential to soak in light as well. But yeah, that's about it about in terms of dryness and airflow. So moving on to the last topic, which is light condition. So airplanes do need light. I do have quite a lot of people come up to me and ask me if this is gonna be okay at an office or in the basement. And the answer is yes, but probably not the greatest in the long run. In the office, it depends on how much natural light you get, but artificial lights, especially if they're not actually grow lights, is probably not going to be enough. So your plant can probably sit there for weeks or even months without too much issue. But if you grow air plants, you probably know your air plants die when it's just like suddenly, So basically, when you notice it has trouble, it's probably already too late. So to avoid that happen, definitely more light would be better. So how much light is enough light? Bright indirect light, like a lot of houseplants description would say, is pretty good. But what does that actually mean? A few feet away from a south-facing window or east-facing window is probably pretty good. They can also do well at a north-facing window where it gets much less light, but for something like that, it would have to be right next to the window. So a few feet away from a north-facing window is too little already for sure. They do love grow lights too, so if you have a grow light setup, they will love that because they do get quite a lot of bright light in those conditions. So I have a few air plants in my greenhouse cabinet, for example, and they do really well in there. One thing that I do want to mention is too much light is also not good, especially if you give it too much light suddenly. So for example, at a south-facing window, if it's right next to the window and it gets super strong direct sun, like throughout the day, especially maybe like right around noon, it is probably too strong for them. And a lot of species like these greener ones, they will have burn marks. Happened to me myself a few times. And sunburns are not deadly to air plants, but they just don't look nice. And if it's severe sunburn, like everywhere on the plant, it could kill your plant slowly. So you just want to be careful because every species is a little different. But the more trichomes you see, which means the air plant appears more white, the better they can take in sun usually. Because like I mentioned earlier, the trichomes, the white stuff on their air plants, they use it kind of as sunscreen. They can deflect sunlight. So something like Tectorum is great because it has very thick trichomes. So these guys can pretty much take on the full sun pretty well. And Xerographica can take on full sun too. But always a little bit shade is better than really direct full sun. They're not cactus or succulents. Something like Caput Medusa is probably pretty good too. Something thin like the Funkiana over here, probably not the greatest to have full sun. And like I mentioned, these greener varieties, probably not the best to have full sun. But other than that, they are not super picky with light condition, and they can probably do relatively well anywhere in your home. But like I said, if you wanted to grow well and faster and produce pups and especially flowering, then you want to give pretty good light conditions for them to really grow well and thrive. But they're not as picky and unforgiving as some of the house plants. Trying to think of an example, but like they're not too picky like some of the monsteras or philodendron. Actually, those can take on low lights pretty well. I don't know. I'm trying to think of one that's really high light requirement. Probably succulents, I guess. But anyways, that is about it. But yeah, other than that, I don't think that I missed anything. But if you have any questions about these topics, or you've done all these things and your airplanes are still dying, feel free to leave a comment below, and I'll definitely try my best to get to you to answer your questions. But other than that, we have more videos coming. I will talk about trimming airplanes, removing dead leaves and all that, and also more Tilly specs episodes are coming where I talk about specific species and how to take care of them. So yeah, look forward to those. But other than that, thank you for joining us today, and I will see you guys next time. Bye bye. Hey everybody.
Today I'm gonna show you 5 airplanes.
Okay, don't worry. Yeah. Hey everyone. Welcome to another Dave's Airplane Corner video. Today we're gonna do a video on the 5.
Today I'm gonna show you 5 things that'll keep your airplanes alive.
Okay.